Good morning, good morning. It is night 1 of 3. I am Kimberly, your local nurse, ER nurse. I am getting ready for 1 of 3 in the ER tonight, and I come on here. I'm just trying to do a little get ready with me. I have been a nurse for 25 years this month, and yeah, I'm still at the bedside. I know it sounds crazy, but it is just where I'm at right now. And I do love what I do. I know it's hard to fall in love with what you do and stay falling, in love with what you do, but I'm still here doing it. So I am just having some of my coffee, and if you can see the foam on this coffee, it is like chef's kiss right now. So I am just gonna take a sip of coffee, and we're gonna get into it. Look at that. You see that foam? Thank you, Nespresso. I am not sponsored. My kids got me an espresso for Christmas, and I am enjoying every minute of it. So I need to just get in and get the beat down, put down on my face right now. And I want to talk about a few things about nursing in general. Like, I've had so many nurses say to me, 25 years, like, how in the hell are you still doing it after this long? And I don't have all the answers on it, but I can share with you some of my experiences. And I want to talk today about different avenues that your career can go into to kind of keep the interest and the spice going on in your practice. Nursing as a whole it is a tough job. It is a really tough job. And there can be times that you go through periods of burnout. And I can't help but notice all of the videos online about nurses leaving the practice or nurses being in the practice for only a short bit. Let me adjust this just a smidge. Being in the practice for only a little bit and then immediately wanting to leave the practice. I see it all the time. I've been through that. Like, I've been through times where I've been incredibly burnt out and I wanted to leave as a whole. But what I can tell you is that you're not stuck. Nursing, there are so many things that you can do in nursing, and if you're feeling burnout and you're feeling stuck, then it's time to reevaluate what you're doing and maybe make a change. So we're gonna get into all the different kinds of nursing that there is out there, and I will share with you some of the things I have done over the course of my career, because it's not always been this straight linear path in critical care and emergency medicine. I have had times where I moonlit in other areas, or I took hiatuses, like very small, or went part-time in one and did another side gig hustle, or did something else, or I left it for a few months at a time and went to another department, just to kind of keep it fresh. Or those times when I was feeling like I didn't really want to do one thing or the other anymore. The practice has allowed me to move in and out of other areas, which I think is one of the beauties of nursing. Sorry, I'm going to be putting my makeup on my throat, which it always like hits my voice box when I'm doing this, so my apologies. So I started nursing in 2000, and I began my career in the ICU. I had actually worked as a tech in the ER for the years prior when I was going to school, and I loved the ER. I felt like I was home there immediately when I was doing ER, and I knew I would come back to it, but the community ER that I had been working at the time, they weren't all into hiring new grads. They probably would have, but at the same time, I wanted to hone my skills in an ER in a place that I could learn, as much as possible. So I went to critical care. My phone keeps like slipping, so I'm gonna try to fix that. So I went to a very large academic medical center in Los Angeles. Pardon me, I've got a hair sticking. I try to tie my hair back when I'm doing my makeup because I don't like having makeup and blonde hair. I just think that looks gross. I started in the ICU. It was a new grad program. I was recruited there while I was in school, and I figured it was going to be really hard. But I was at that point in my life where I was like, I can do hard things, and I knew that I was pumped up to learn, and was that an experience. It was nothing like I thought it was going to be. It was absolutely a completely different journey for me but I am glad it was one I took. And I stayed in that ICU for about 4 years, which allowed me to kind of write my ticket wherever I wanted to go after I was done. So that was amazing. So after I left, I'll just get into it. That that ICU was it was a surgical ICU. I'm sorry, I'm looking for my bronzer. It was a surgical ICU, and we also had to be cross-trained in the cardiothoracic ICU. So it was the 7th floor had the surgical ICU, and the 4th and 5th floor were cardiothoracic and some lung and heart transplant. So I was cross-trained in both, and my mainstay was surgical ICU. And for some reason, I really gravitated towards neuro. I absolutely loved neurosurgery, which a lot of people hate it, but I feel like I learned so much, and it just fascinated me, all of the things with the brain. And there was some really intense patients as far as heavy loads that I learned about, as far as having ventriculostomies, craniotomies, real surgeries. And at that point in my career, I think every patient that came to our ICU, and on my unit we did a lot of liver transplant, everybody had central lines. They all had arterial lines. They all had CVP monitoring. They all had central lines like Swan-Ganz catheters with everything else. And learning all those things was important. I didn't, I'm not in a place where I use them all the time now, but I'm grateful for the experience that I had with those things. And as much as I hated it at the time, we had a lot of codes in that unit on a regular basis. Like on average, we had a couple codes a week, and it was not uncommon for your new transplant patients to code at least once in the first 48 hours at that time. We also did high-risk bariatric, which was crazy. Most of our patients had to be over 600 pounds at that time in order to get the surgery. The criteria was a little different back then. And there were, when I say heavy, I'm not talking about weight. I'm talking about just the clinical care part of it was pretty intense. So there was a lot of stuff. There was thoracic foregut. There was just a pretty broad, rounded type of experience breadth that I was able to get while I was there. So I am grateful for that time. I was really grateful for the experience I had at that time there. But like I said, it allowed me to write my ticket where I wanted to go next. And during the time I was there was a lot of travelers, and I was talking to travelers, networking, figuring out what was what. I'm going to do my naked palate 3, I think it is. It's just my neutrals. That's what we're going to go with tonight. So yeah, I got to network with a lot of nurses who were had experience with the big travel companies, and I decided to go ahead and take a travel contract. And when I started working with my recruiter, she, we went through a lot of different things as far as what I wanted to do, and I was surprised. I thought they would just want to put me back in an ICU. And they offered me several different types of jobs, but because I was a young mother and I was a young single mother, my ability to travel state to state was not there. I needed to stay close to home. I owned my own home. I wanted to be within a certain mile radius of my home so I could be closer to my children. And by that point, I was wanting to also maybe have some better hours so I could be there for my kids. had been working night shift for those 4 years, and I wanted to dabble in maybe doing something that might let me have a little bit of a normal life. And I don't know. I'm back on night shift now. I love night shift. I'm just one of those weirdos that likes night shift, but at the time, it worked really well for us. So I ended up doing a PACU / surgical floor travel contract, and I went, that is like real dark. Sorry. I went to a place where I was doing PACU, and the reason I was allowed to go straight from ICU to there is we did all of our recoveries in the ICU when I was working there. So we were well trained on the post-anesthesia recovery period, conscious sedations, codes, and intubations and everything else. So it wasn't like it was a huge jump for me. The types of surgeries that were coming into the PACU I was in were a little different. And some of it's you learn as you go, but I didn't feel like I was out of my depth or anything like that. I felt like the PACU patients were not quite as intense as what I had been experiencing at the university hospital. So while I was there for 6 months. I fell in love with the contract. I loved the people. I got along with everybody. It was a really positive experience. I was also trained to circulate certain cases. You kind of have that happen if you're good at something, or when the staff, you gel with the staff and you get to know the doctors and everybody else. There will be times they will call you in and ask you if you can help circulate a case or do this or that. And you might start small with a small circulating of a case, and then you learn certain things and go on from there. So I was able to learn to circulate a bit, but primarily I was doing PACU, post-anesthesia recovery unit. And it went on for 6 months. Like I said, I loved it. I enjoyed it a lot. And then there, like all good things that come to an end, the hospital was in that mode where they had been using travelers for a while, and there was a new administration coming in, and they wanted to do away with all the travelers. Sound familiar? Because it happens all the time. And I recently there was a thing at my current job where the travelers were all either renegotiated or let go, and everybody was really upset because some of them had been there for quite a long time since COVID. And, everybody was in an uproar, and a lot of the nurses that I was working with, like, you're the younger nurses. They've been nurses longer, less than 7 or 8 years, some less than that. And they had not been through an experience like that. They had gotten used to the money being great. And of course, when we're in a position where we're out there getting that big money, we never want that to go away. But I'm going to warn you on something. If you hear me, hear me all the way from the back. I'm telling you that if you're in a position where you're a traveler and you're making phenomenal money, enjoy it, do it, get as much of it as you can while you can. It does not always last. And it's just one of those things that you have to be prepared for and plan for the times when that money isn't there. Have a backup plan. Have a plan for what you're going to do when that money isn't there, or that contract dries up, or the market and travel, kind of dries up, because it will, and it always does. And I have seen this over the years. I have seen it happen time and time and time again, where there's ebbs and flows in the market. There's something that has a big influx of travelers and contracts that are amazing, and then all of a sudden it's here one day, gone the next. So hear me when I say plan for the times when those contracts aren't there. What is your backup plan? Where are you going to go? What are you going to do? Are you going to go back to home? Do you have a primary residence that you can utilize? Have you kept a primary residence? What's your plan long term? Or what's your plan in the time when that dries up? So as a nurse, I hear everybody talking right now. There's a lot of grumbles out there. In the last, 12 months or so, there has been a huge shift in the contract world, and those contracts are not there, or if they are there, they're in areas that you might find less desirable, but it is what it is. You can be flexible. I don't know why my camera keeps doing this, but it keeps falling a little bit, so I'm just going to keep readjusting it. Be flexible. Understand that money, the big money, might not be there. Don't be angry. You can get mad about it a little bit, but at the end of the day, it'll come back around if that's what you really want to do. But have your backup plan ready. Are you doing education? I always screw this up, by the way, when I do my liquid eyeliner. I'm going to try to do it on camera. I always fail epically. So I'm going to have to look at the mirror when I do this, because it's just one of those things. So I'm just going to say, oh my God, here we go. Have a good backup plan. Save some money, for the in-between. Save some money for when you need to move and pay for those moves, or exit a lease, or, are you in a month-to-month, or what you got to do. And network. Always be networking. And then the other thing I encourage people to do is when they are in a job and they have a staff they get along with, because a lot of times what happens with contract work is you end up really liking and getting along with people, and you have nurse managers and everything that like you. And if you're doing a great job and everything has been smooth sailing, then please get letters of recommendation to keep in your file. Even if you don't need it like right this minute, get those letters of recommendation. It is so important. Ask for them. Don't be ashamed to ask for a letter of recommendation. Ask for a letter of recommendation from your bosses, coworkers, charge nurses, whoever, just to put in your file. It will help you wherever you go. Because what ends up happening is when you go to apply for a job, sometimes people aren't available when they're calling and checking references, or you're entering a competitive market where, a lot of people are going for same jobs. And when you put together a really impressive hiring packet, nurses are not the greatest at selling themselves, unfortunately. That's something that if you can hone your skills on that, I would encourage you to do that, because learning to sell yourself and toot your own horn is a big deal. Did I just mess this up? I hope I didn't. I think they're close. I got my little wings I think I'm going with tonight. So, yeah, don't be afraid to toot your own horn. Get those letters of recommendation, and when the next job comes up, you'll be ready to go. Okay, so after I did the travel contract, I ended up going to visit one of my coworkers at my old job. We had stayed in touch. I lived in the same city that I had once worked in that ER, and I went by to visit someone. I think I was dropping off a car seat or something crazy like that for a friend of mine, and it just so happened there was a lull in their day, and someone I had known was now in the interim director position, and we got to talking. And of course she immediately said, like, what are you doing? I told her my contract was going to be ending soon and I was looking at another travel contract. And oh my gosh, her face, she went all in. She's like, come here, you need to come home. And it was so sweet. She and about 4 other nurses went all in, and they did the hard sell. They were like, you live down the street essentially from this hospital. Your kids are still young. We're family, And, I know some people get triggered by the fact when they say, a job says family. But in this place, it really was like family. Like most of them were in the delivery room or in the vicinity when I gave birth to my second child. We were close. We networked as far as childcare, as far as the other nurses. And so it was a really close, tight-knit group, and they were like my second family. And like I've said, sometimes you spend more time with your people at work than you do with your own family. So I ended up going, and I wanted to know what were they paying, because I had gotten used to that good travel money. And for me, I was making a pittance at my 4-year ICU stint job, because once you got in, they never really bumped up your salaries, and they could have served themselves a lot better had they increased their salaries to market value or paid the staff members at least what was comparable to what some travelers were making by the time you were 2 years in or whatever. It just became this like cycle where people would come in, do their time, and leave. So I had been making the poor money at the ICU. Now, when I went to the travel contract, I was making some of the travel money, which was nice. I wasn't making a great hourly, but I was getting a housing stipend because I lived within the mileage that at the time worked, and I was allowed to get the housing allowance at the time. I know that rules have changed, things have, are always evolving and changing, but at the time I was making some of that travel money. So I was shocked because they had recently redone their pay scales at that old hospital, so timing was everything. And they were offering me a really nice hourly rate wage, which I was thrilled about, to be able to live and work in the same city. I could take, kids to school, do that kind of stuff. I was hired for mids, and I did mids for about, I want to say, a year and a half, and it was not working for me. It was too hard. I didn't feel like I got to see my kids. I was exhausted all of the time because I was coming home, trying to get them to school, sleep a little bit, and I got off at like 1:00 in the morning or 1:30 in the morning. And then I would have to just sleep for a few hours to get them ready for school. It was miserable. And I was working, for me, I didn't like mids because you're working at that place, it was the most intense part of both shifts. So you were not day shift, you were not night shift, you were getting crucified like at 12 hours the whole time. There was no like time where you could catch up or any downtime. It wasn't working. So I decided to go to night shift, where I stayed for quite some time. I am going to have to wrap up this video, and I will continue on. I've been on about 20 minutes, and I have to get out of here because I'm running a little bit behind, and I still have wet hair, so I got to dry my hair. So where we're at right now is I went back to my hometown ER, and I stayed there for a number of years, and until I was on to the next thing. So I had gone from ICU to PACU surgery, learned circulating and some maternal child health, which I thought was amazing. I learned about recovery of C-sections and recovery of some women's health things. I learned a lot during that time. And then I ended up back in my ER, which, good and bad. And during that time, because I was there for, I think, about 8 years, 7 or 8, I'm thinking, or was it 6? I have to think back. It's, when you've been a nurse for 25 years, times run together, and it's hard. You got to sit down and try to remember which years to when. And I stayed there until I decided to go back to school and advance my degree again. So I was going back for my fourth degree at this point. Third degree. Yeah, fourth. I had 2 associates. I actually got a dual associates, a bachelor's in biology. So I was at 3, and I was going back for my 4th degree, which, believe it or not, my bachelor's degree was my 4th degree. And I enrolled in a program, and I stayed at the ER for a while. But then I decided that because of the projects that were upcoming and that I had to do some visitation to some larger facilities, and my graduation project was not just, it was going to take up a lot of time, and my schooling was taking up a lot of time. I needed some flexibility for my classes. So I decided to move on, and I'll tell you why I went back to school. There was a reason why. I had some goals about working for not staying in private sector, but going into public sector. And every public sector job, I'm talking about government work, whether you're going to go state, county, or federal, you are required in most positions to have a bachelor's degree. So I really needed that to get my foot in the door to move on into public sector work. So that's it. So I have to go finish getting ready. Night 1 of 3. I love sharing. I'm going to continue to do videos, and for tonight, I will see you on the flip side.